Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today is part 3 of my Union Army Let's Play in Ultimate General Gettysburg. In the first battle, we successfully held the Confederates at bay and maintained our control over Seminary Ridge. We did lose Oak Hill. On the second battle, we successfully defended our front again on Seminary Ridge and Oak Ridge. We lost Oak Hill remained lost, and we lost Blucher's Knoll, but the Confederate flanking assault against us was not successful. The Confederates now are in a much more advantageous position, however, than we are to start. We hold Seminary and Oak Ridges, but we are still under pressure. We should prepare for another rebel attack as they reform. Our defenses on the ridges will be under attack from their main force, while another element marches toward Barlow's Knoll. And we have forces just south of the town that may be necessary for the defense. We currently hold strong defensive ground, but the rebels have not given up yet. If an opportunity presents itself to attack, take it. Good luck, General. So again, this is a alteration on history, as we didn't fall to the initial flanking attack. The 11th Corps did well to reform, even though they lost Blucher's Knoll. And now we risk being caught in a kind of a salient with our troops, our strong front on Seminary Ridge and Oak Ridge, and yet our flank being somewhat turned. Our troops could be caught between two enemy forces and destroyed. Hopefully that's not the case. My best brigade, the Iron Brigade, and our best brigade mainly because a lot of Wisconsinites are in it, has lost almost 600 men, down from about 1,400 to 866 men, but it's inflicted terrible damage on the enemy. Cutler's New Yorkers have done similar. Those are probably the two standout brigades of mine so far. Maybe the two best brigades in the entire Union Army. I'm not sure. I'm a little bit partial, though, because I'm from Wisconsin. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I probably won't be talking about the battle so much as a discussion I wanted to have about politics. That's kind of dangerous, I think, but I guess you'll see what I mean in a moment. Alright, so I don't know why our troops have their backs to the enemy here. It looks like we've got... I'm not sure. This is a really weird setup right now for our men. I'm just taking a look here on the screen, and... yeah, I don't understand why we've got this particular defensive lineup. If the enemy's... what the heck? So our men are already caught in a salient. The enemy's on every single side of us, and we don't have any troops positioned here to face them. Not enough, anyway. I guess we could try... no way. We're not going to hold. Is it bad if I just retreat now? That's what I'm going to do. Okay, Iron Brigade retreat. Cutler, retreat. Paul, retreat. Biddle, retreat. Von Glees. We're going to fall back to the town. I do not like the strategic position that we're starting in. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and fall back to Gettysburg, the town, without so much as a shot being fired. I do not like the starting positions here. We're just too exposed. The enemy's already got us surrounded. We'll concede Oak Ridge because I don't know why it said if the opportunity presents itself, counterattack. There are no objectives on the screen here for us to counterattack. Nothing. So we're going to move in. We're going to take Culp's Hill. We're going to maintain our hold on Cemetery Hill. Those are our two main objectives. Those are worth 10,000 points between the two. Oak Ridge, which we're abandoning now, is only worth 1,500. So I'm not worried about that. I guess I kind of knew that would be the situation coming in, though, because the last battle, the way we lost Blucher's Knoll, our flank was already turned. It was only a matter of time until the Confederates caught us in somewhat of a salient. So we'll withdraw now, and maybe we'll hold Seminary Ridge. We're reforming our line here through the town, and hopefully the enemy contents himself with taking Oak Ridge. Although I personally would just fall back towards Seminary Ridge and Cemetery Hill. There's not much strategic value in just holding Seminary Ridge. You can see here, enemy has about 22,000 men, 76 guns. We've got 1,600 men and 48 guns. Not sure why we outrank their I don't know, pull and tug and pull, whatever that is. So the 11th Corps, you can see here, is reforming in the town. Von Glees can shift a little bit over, Krasinski a little bit over. We'll go ahead and set these guys up in the town. But what I wanted to talk about in this battle was the reason for the Civil War. I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and it's a discussion that I'm not going to end here today. Not me personally, I just mean I'm not going to win the debate about the Civil War. But the reason I'm talking about it is I saw a comment in one of my previous videos on the topic where a couple of people were going back and forth about why are you guys not retreating? About the purpose of the Civil War. Why was it fought? And there seems to be two competing camps. One camp, which typically is pro-union, says the war was all about slavery. The other camp says it was not about slavery, it was all about states' rights. So which was it? Well, I'll add my 2 cents to the discussion for whatever that's worth. I think it was both. I think both sides are correct. And this is not me being politic or trying to please everyone. This is my honest opinion, as the Confederates come forward in a giant, unanimous human wave assault, circa Russia. But here's what I mean by it being both. The Civil War was fought about states' rights. This is true. The states' rights that were in question was the right to own human property, the right to own slaves. So here's where we come from this conclusion, or this is where I come from this conclusion. The South for years was acting very concerned with what they viewed as an overreach in federal authority governing just basically governing everything. The Confederacy, or the Southern states, for many years before, had been very concerned about the federal government's laws and policies regarding trade, economics, slavery, all sorts of issues. They believed the federal government was too big. They believed it was having too much of an impact on certain policies. It was being draconian. It was telling them what they could and couldn't do. It was being dictatorial in their eyes. And so the Southern states ended up seceding. That's the short story. But the question is why? What was the issue at hand? What were the Southern states upset about? And what that came down to, in my opinion, was slavery. The principle at stake, the fundamental reason that the Southern states seceded, was they did not want the North saying, you can or cannot do this with your slaves. You can or you cannot be a slave state. You can or cannot buy and sell human individuals. You can or cannot have tariffs on certain products, or what have you. So the whole argument was, we don't want the federal government telling us what we can't do. You know, we should be able to make that decision. We're states, and many of them view themselves as sovereign states. So we are states. We have these rights afforded to us through the Constitution for being states, and we should be able to make these decisions on our own. The federal government fundamentally should not be able to tell us what we can or cannot do in our own state. We came together to have a more secure country, to have a unified body, but it's getting in the way. We want to be able to make this decision for our people. Life in South Carolina is not the same as life in New York, and some New Yorker thousands of miles away should not be telling us what we can't do. The problem is, what did they care about? Why were they willing to go to war? Why were they willing to revolt? Well, the issue that they were debating was slavery. That's not to say that states' rights wasn't the fundamental issue, because it was. But again, it was an issue based on whether Southern states should have the right to decide that they want to have slavery, or whether any states should be able to debate whether they have a right to have slavery. Now, Lincoln wasn't going to come in and end slavery right away. It wasn't a discussion about that, but the fear was the Southern states were losing control of Congress. And by losing control of Congress, it meant that the federal government would become subject to Northern states. And as a result, they felt like their interests were no longer being represented by the government, therefore they didn't want to be a part of the government anymore. But again, the primary issue was slavery. If you can show me another key issue that the Southern states were upset about, then I will gladly concede the point. But that other point is not states' rights. It has to be a point where you're saying, this is a political opinion that the South had that the North did not have, that the South was not glad the North had, and the South believed the federal government was overreaching. There are certain elements to that. I think in the 1840s there was kind of almost a revolution over tariffs, but the tariffs really had to do with protecting northern industry against England. And the reason that was important was because it was cotton related. The tariffs were cotton related, and cotton was a principal staple crop of the South, which was the main crop supporting slavery. So again, I don't view that as a legitimate concern, because the concern again ties back to slavery. The Southern economy was based on slavery. Therefore, their concerns about their rights not being upheld, and their concerns about the North ignoring the concerns of Southern states with regards to their economics and their political beliefs, does fundamentally rely around the issue of slavery. I'm not putting this as well as I had it in my head, but I think both sides are right, because the truth is it was a debate over states' rights. It really was. One side wanted to do one thing, one side wanted to be able to do another. They didn't want the federal government saying you can or can't do this, but when you get down to the issues they were discussing, it's slavery. I don't see how you can get around that. So again, I think everyone's right, and yet everyone's wrong. Are Northerners or whoever wrong in saying that the war was about slavery? No, because it was. But that debate over slavery was specifically being debated because of policies that were being enacted relating to the Southern practice of slavery. So again, both sides are right, both sides are wrong. Slavery was the linchpin of the Southern economy. It was critical to the Southern states' ability to sustain themselves. It was critical to the cultural and social fabric of the living in the South, and whether a very small percentage of Southern soldiers had slavery. So I wouldn't say that the majority of Southern soldiers fought for slavery. The majority of Southern soldiers probably fought because, hey, the Northern soldiers are here. There was a famous quote from a Confederate prisoner of war who was taken by the Union. I believe it was actually when the Union, the Iron Brigade, took a large percentage of Archer's Brigade captive on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. And he asked, why are you fighting? Why are you down here? Or, well, I don't think it could have been Gettysburg, actually, now that I think about it, because that wouldn't fit the story of what he said. But anyway, the line goes, why are you fighting this war? And the Southern soldier said, because you're down here. Essentially stating, I don't care about slavery. I don't care about all the politics behind the war. I'm fighting because you're attacking my home. And that was probably true for the majority of soldiers, maybe even the majority of officers. The primary concern for them was not slavery. The vast majority of them were not slaveholders. But, again, the economic interests of the South are the fundamental cause for the actual war. And the economic interests of the South revolve around the practice of slavery. So I don't think there's any getting around it. I think there is no doubt that slavery was the biggest issue at hand in leading to the Civil War occurring. But I also think that the principle that was being debated was not strictly slavery. It wasn't the South saying, we want to, we want to have slaves, and that's all we care about. We don't care about anything else. Now, it's accurate. That's what the South cared about. That's what the South cared about more than anything else. But the principles that they used to debate, what they wanted, was the principle of states' rights. So I'm willing to concede that the South thought they were fighting for states' rights. I'm not willing to concede that they were not fighting for slavery, though. The states' rights they were fighting for was the right to determine that they would have slavery. So there you go. That's my opinion on the matter. I could be wrong. I'm not as articulate as I had planned out. I've debated this much more, perhaps accurately, but it's something I wanted to talk about, and maybe I'll go in more detail about it later, because I really kind of felt like this broke down to me just debating myself and saying the same thing over and over again. But I do think there's a big difference between saying a war is about slavery and a war is about states' rights. The concept of the war being fought over states' rights in of itself, to me, says we're fighting this war on the principle of states' rights, regardless of what the issue is at hand. And I don't think that's accurate. I don't think you see the South fighting a war if they don't have slavery interests that they're fighting to defend. I just don't think that's accurate. I think the reason that the South cared about states' rights is because they felt the North was not giving states the rights that they should have, but the reason they felt that way were Northern legislation surrounding the practice of slavery. And I'm sure someone much more learned and who studied the topic much more could probably give a more accurate and thought-out argument. I don't have specific examples I can cite stating, well, here's an example of states' rights where it doesn't involve slavery, because I don't. But I'm not sure they exist either. So I guess that's my point, is that you can fight for states' rights. You can make that argument that this war was about states' rights and be correct, and at the same time be incorrect when you state that the war was not about slavery. There's nothing that says you can't fight over the issue of slavery through the principle of states' rights, or vice versa. There's nothing stating you cannot fight, saying that, well, the idea of states' rights is this, therefore we want to make sure we have these rights. Well, why do you care about those rights so much? Well, because they help us defend the practice of slavery. And I think that's where you come from. I think that's what the South was coming from. The South was saying, these are our principles of defense, and these principles are states' rights, and, well, states' rights are there to defend slavery. And it may even be a revisionist historian kind of looking at it and making that argument that it was really about states' rights and not about slavery. I've seen that argument before, that a lot of Southern politicians specifically spell out fighting the war for slavery, whereas after the fact some politicians or some historians come in and say, well, you know, the South is this underdog, we want to root for them. And as in many situations with underdogs, a lot of people kind of have this nostalgic kind of feel like there's this noble cause. Well, I don't know if it was so noble, but there's this noble cause fighting against this great tyrannical government, and we should support it, and they were just outnumbered, and there's this sort of lost cause mentality that comes into into Southern historians after the Civil War, basically arguing the South was fighting almost like, you know, like, what's his name? I can't even remember the name. The knight, the English knight. You know, this noble knight fighting against tyranny and, you know, all that was bad, and standing up for chivalry and all that is good. And that's the South against this evil menace, this evil large menace of the Union. And they were doomed from the start, but they fought well and they fought hard, and, you know, that's all you can ask. It was a noble cause. I kind of feel like there's that mentality that, well, the South was a noble idea, it was a noble cause, it was a fight against tyrannical large government, it was a fight for small government, and therefore it was a worthy fight, but they had no chance to win. I don't buy that lost cause argument. The South had a chance to win. Not a good chance, but they had a chance. They had their opportunities. They weren't successful, but if the South wins, it wouldn't have been impossible, I'll put it this way. It would not have been impossible for the South to win. The South routs the Union Army at the Battle of Second Manassas. If more Southern soldiers go north in the invasion of Antietam, and it wasn't really up to Lee, but if more Southern soldiers go north and invade and defeat McClellan in the north, there is a possibility there that the European countries come in on the side of the Confederacy and they win. That's a possibility. I don't think by Gettysburg that was possible. They also could have won the Battle of Gettysburg. They could have pulled a Cannae, or whatever the Hannibal victory was over the Romans. They could have pulled the battle of that and won and crushed the Union Army and destroyed the Army of the Potomac at virtually no loss. And then they could have advanced and had some brilliant tactics against the fortifications around Washington and won. I don't buy the argument that it's impossible to win. No military engagement is impossible to win. Maybe improbable, maybe unlikely, but not impossible. So I don't buy that argument. But it seems to me that that's part of the argument of people who argue that, you know, slavery was not the main cause of the war. Is people like to argue that, well, it wasn't really slavery, it was states' rights, and you know, therefore it's easier to justify your support of them, because it's hard to say I really like these guys, but they fought for a bad cause. And I think that's why a lot of people make the argument that it wasn't about slavery. I'm not saying they're wrong. I think they're right. If you're looking at strictly on principle, if you're saying what's the reason, what's the fundamental principle that we're fighting the war, I think you're right. It's states' rights. It just so happens that those states' rights were slavery. That's where I come from. That's how I see it. That's what I think. But I could be wrong. I will concede that point, that maybe I'm not right. Maybe I'm wrong. I am not an expert. I'm merely stating my opinions. I'm not someone who has a PhD in the matter. And it would far be from me to say I've never been wrong, because I'd be lying. I also wish I had better examples to point out specifically, because there are better examples out there, and I wish I had them, because I think I'd make a stronger argument. But I don't have the time at this moment. I'm just getting ready to head up north for my wife and I's first anniversary, and again, I may be wrong. Don't write me a nasty letter. If you disagree with me, tell me. Say in the comments, but tell me why. Tell me what your thought is. How is states' rights totally independent from the idea of slavery? Explain it to me, because if I'm wrong, I want to know about it, and I want to see that example showing me that I'm wrong, because that's kind of the opinion I've had probably for the last 4 years, is that, sure, you're right, it was about states' rights, but that states' rights was slavery. And if I'm wrong about that, I want to know, because I always want to be more educated about it, and I always want to learn more about history and more about why people do things. I think that's one of the misnomers about history, is that most people seem to think, and it's true probably in high school, most people tend to think history is about memorizing names, dates, and facts. And I'll concede that at a high school level, history is mainly about learning facts. I would argue at a collegiate level, or especially if you have a doctorate, it's not at all about facts. What history is about is, why do people make the decisions that they make? Why did people do the things that they do? It's a reason of why. It's a study of humanity and decision-making through humanity's history, less so than it is specifically on this day this happened. Well, why does that matter? It matters because it's a reflection of why we make the decisions we make as humans. That's my opinion. But enough for this poorly laid out, poorly argued philosophical questioning, more so than anything. You can see there we won a minor victory. We managed to hang on to Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, which was really all I wanted to do. We lost about 2,100 soldiers. The Confederacy lost over 3,000, again, 3,100 soldiers. They took Seminary and Oak Ridges, but it took them too much time. They weren't able to seriously threaten Culp's or Cemetery Hill. I would imagine the battle is just about over for the first day's battle, and a pretty good result for us. The enemy, again, lost about 1,000 more men than we did. They lost 1,600 more men than we did the day before, or the battle before that. I think they lost about equal with us the first battle. So we're probably around 10,000 Confederate casualties to around 7,000 Union casualties, roughly. So that's a pretty good start for the side that's going to dramatically outnumber the other later in the battle. Again, minor victory. So we had a draw, a major victory, and a minor victory. We now have two options. We lost Gettysburg yesterday, but the death of so many brave men was not for nothing. The Army of the Potomac is being deployed on the high ground south of town. There's also an opportunity to expand our deployment to the hills west of town before the rebels launch their attack. Shall we advance, General? So we could attack Benner's Hill, or we could defend Cemetery Ridge here on the 2nd of July. Couldn't hold the rebels yesterday. Our men are tired and their spirit is worn, but we still hold the high ground south of town. The rest of the army marched all day to arrive at this on time, and there's still portions en route. We should fortify this position and wait for the rebels to attack next. We have our ground. We have good ground. There's no need to take risks should we defend our positions, General. Warning, the enemy may take a decision that will force us to fight elsewhere. So, if we sit back and do nothing, it appears that we could end up at Little Round Top, we could end up on the right. I'm not sure how the AI decides their attacks. If we attack Benner's Hill, we seize the initiative and launch an aggressive counterattack against the enemy. But we also probably uncover and risk our positions on Cemetery Hill, so there's a lot of risk in that. If you want to know what happens, tune into the next video, because that's going to be all for this one. I appreciate you tuning in. This is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm out.